If you become the department head, everyone will quit. The office fell silent at Miles's loud outburst. With a smug look on his face, Miles threw his resignation letter onto my desk. Following his lead, the employees standing behind him started tossing their resignation letters one by one, 20 in total. But the moment they heard my words, they all widened their eyes in shock. Thank goodness. This is such a relief. What? Miles's face went blank as he stood there, mouth agape. I slowly looked around at their faces, a calm smile forming on mine. There comes a time in life when you have to figure out what truly matters. Sometimes it's harsh, and it might even lead you down the wrong path, but in the end, it's all up to your own choices. My name is Kieran. I'm a 36-year-old employee working at a small company in the city. Up until now, my life hasn't been particularly eventful, just the usual. I went through high school, then college, and landed a job like everyone else. After getting a few job offers, I ended up choosing my current company based on the salary and the nature of the work. Nothing special. I work in sales and have no particular complaints, just doing my best wherever the company places me. But now, for the first time, I'm faced with a life-changing decision that has left me truly puzzled. And the reason for that is Miles, my coworker, 6 years younger than me. Miles just turned 30 and takes pride in being a graduate of a prestigious university in the city. He's at his peak in terms of learning the ins and outs of the job. As a mid-level employee, he's expected to lead the younger staff, and the company has given him significant responsibilities over the years, hoping for his growth. But that might have inflated his ego beyond reason. Before anyone realized it, Miles had become the kind of troublesome employee who constantly complained about the company. With my skills, I should be making more money. But instead, I barely get any raises, not enough vacation days, and I'm stuck doing boring work. These complaints would come straight to me, his direct supervisor, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed at his sense of entitlement. Though Miles worked hard in his own way, his enthusiasm often backfired, leading to occasional successes but also frequent blunders that erased all his progress. He seemed to think of himself as an elite, but 1 out of every 3 times, he caused some sort of problem. Even though he should have known the standard procedures, he kept adding his own twist to them, which often confused our clients. More than once, he added terms to a contract without prior discussion, telling the client, "This is the better option. You should definitely try it." And each time, it fell on me, his supervisor, to clean up the mess. Miles, I understand your enthusiasm and that you wanted to do something good for the client. But you can't just change the terms without consulting them first. Well, I can't help it if I get a flash of inspiration. I guess someone like me, an elite, can't expect someone like you, just an average employee, to understand. No matter how much I warned him, Miles would just brush it off, seemingly convinced that I was simply jealous of his elite status. Had he been more humble, I might have been able to correct his misguided behavior, but that was too much to hope for. His pride in his prestigious university background had grown so large that he couldn't build good relationships with the other employees. Miles became the leader of a group of co-workers from the same university, where they regularly vented about the company. At the same time, he began to look down on anyone he perceived as having a lesser education, even if they were his seniors. Naturally, Miles and his group became disliked by the rest of the staff, but none of them left the company. Our company was always short-staffed, and even troublesome employees were seen as a necessary evil. Still, despite his cocky attitude, Miles was only 30, and part of me still hoped he would grow and mature. That's why, as his manager, I continued to guide him with patience. As time went on, the younger employees started gaining more skills and soon surpassed Miles in their number of deals. That's when Miles began making snide remarks, as if trying to cut down the younger staff who were standing out more than him. I'm always stuck with the tough projects, while the younger guys get the easy jobs. It's so unfair. He began openly complaining, and the workplace atmosphere kept deteriorating. Even though we were short-staffed, other employees started voicing concerns that it was becoming difficult to work with Miles around. And soon the office started treating him as a problem. At the time, I was the department manager, responsible for handling the complaints from my team, so I did my best to manage the situation, setting up meetings with Miles whenever an issue arose. But Miles never seemed to think he was in the wrong. Even when I gave him firm feedback, he would calmly respond, "If you dislike me that much, I can quit anytime. I've got friends from college who are starting a new company and want me to join as a co-founder." Though I wasn't about to stop him if he really wanted to quit, Miles just laughed it off, never taking my warnings seriously. "I'm fine with quitting, you know. But without me, this company won't function," Miles declared, clearly waiting for me to stop him. And since it was true that losing him would be problematic, it gave me a headache just thinking about it. Our company was severely understaffed, and new recruits were hard to come by. So even an employee like Miles was considered better than no one at all. We were hiring anyone who applied, but the burden of training them slowed things down even more, creating a vicious cycle. Miles was well aware of this situation, which is probably why he knew I couldn't push back too hard. As I, and the rest of the company, wondered how to handle Miles, the inevitable happened. It started when a younger employee landed a new client. This employee had been quiet and unassuming at first, but unlike Miles, he was humble and eager to learn from his seniors. His serious work ethic made him popular with clients, and as a result, he was growing rapidly since joining the company. Finally, he was recognized as the top salesman of the month. We were all proud of his progress and praised him. But the only one who wasn't happy about it was Miles. He only got that job because of favoritism from a longtime client. If I had been in his position, I would have tripled the profits. Miles muttered to himself, grumbling alone. It would have been fine if that's all he did, but he started criticizing the younger employee under the guise of giving him guidance. However, even though the employee was younger, he had more practical experience on the ground. When the junior politely pointed this out, Miles completely lost his temper. "How dare you, a younger employee, talk back to me? You think results alone give you the right to act like this?" Miles yelled, and the younger employee could only shrink in fear. I rushed in to break it up, but in the end, the younger employee left the company. Soon after, it became clear from the atmosphere in the company that everyone wished that it had been Miles who quit instead of the talented junior. But Miles, oblivious to his role in all this, was furious, saying, "I went out of my way to guide him, and now it looks like I drove him out. If that's how you're going to treat me, I really will quit." "Are you okay with that?" he demanded, getting in my face. Still, he showed no signs of changing his behavior. With the departure of the promising young employee, I finally realized how serious the situation was. If we kept Miles around, other valuable employees would undoubtedly leave. It was obvious that the company would be better off if Miles quit. But firing someone without a good reason wasn't legally allowed. I was stuck, secretly hoping that Miles would actually resign. Then, one day, the tipping point arrived. It was announced that I had been promoted to department head as part of a company reorganization. As I mentioned before, our company was extremely short-staffed, which was partly why I was able to get promoted in my 30s. But this news only seemed to ignite Miles's competitive spirit. If Kieran can be promoted to department head, then I should be promoted to manager right now. I started hearing rumors that Miles was complaining about this within his own group. I knew trouble was brewing, and sure enough, the next day, Miles and his group of 20 employees showed up at my desk. What is this all about? Let me get straight to the point. Either promote us or give us a raise now. Miles's loud voice echoed through the office, plunging the room into silence. He glanced around at the quiet room with a smug expression, then arrogantly tossed his resignation letter onto my desk. If you're going to be department head, we're all quitting. Unless, of course, you accept our demands right now. As if on cue, the other employees began throwing their resignation letters at me as well. They must have thought the company couldn't survive without them. I couldn't believe how foolish they were being. I gathered up the 20 resignation letters, feeling confused as I carefully picked them up. Watching me, Miles sneered and mockingly said, "You'd be in trouble if we all quit, right? So, what are you going to do? If you're smart enough to be promoted to department head, you should know the answer. You're right. If you all left, it would be a huge problem. And I'd definitely be held accountable for my management skills." At my response, Miles and his group exchanged satisfied smiles, nodding to each other as if they'd won. But the next moment, they were stunned, their eyes wide in disbelief at what I said next. Thank goodness. This is such a relief. What? Miles stood there, dumbfounded, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. I calmly looked at their faces and smiled gently. I'm glad to hear your true feelings. It's unfortunate, but I have to respect your decision. What? Wait, what are you talking about? They clearly hadn't expected me to actually accept their resignation letters. Miles, now pale, rushed toward me in a panic. His frantic behavior caused the group behind him to become uneasy. Everyone began to look worried, whispering anxiously among themselves, their faces clouded with uncertainty. Seeing this, I couldn't help but smile to myself, realizing that my hunch had been right. Miles was the only one openly voicing his dissatisfaction with the company. I had suspected that the rest of the group had just been swept up by his momentum, joining him without much thought. Everyone working here knew how short-staffed we were and how hard it was for the company to let anyone go. They probably thought that if Miles's demands were met, they could get promotions and higher pay without much effort. But there's no such thing as getting what you want without putting in the work. Anyone who worked their way up from the bottom, like me, understood that. But Miles and his group, having never faced any major setbacks, had coasted from elite schools into our company based on name recognition alone. They have been living in a world where their selfishness has always been accepted. So they must have joined Miles's rebellion without thinking it through. Now, faced with the reality that their resignation letters might actually be accepted, they were completely panicked. Behind the pale-faced Miles, I could hear the anxious murmurs of his group. Wait, this can't be real, right? This was just supposed to be a negotiation tactic, right? Isn't this common in other countries? Their confusion made me sigh, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. It's true that negotiating for better pay or working conditions had been done before, but it was always through calm, rational discussions. You'd research beforehand, present valid reasons, and then arrange a meeting with the company to discuss a raise. What they were doing, threatening to quit unless their demands were met, had no precedent in our company. I looked at the panicking employees and at Miles, who stood defiantly in front of them, and decided to give them one last chance to negotiate. If any of you want to take back your resignation, now's the time. No one in this company has ever tried this kind of stunt before. That's because there have never been employees as talented as us." Miles, despite his pale complexion, continued with his arrogant claims. But behind him, it was clear his group no longer wanted to stand by him. They were looking down, shifting uneasily, no longer aligned with their leader. I addressed the unsettled group with a gentle tone. "Is this really what you want? Are you all resigning because you have genuine grievances with the company? Or are you just following along without thinking?" At my words, the other employees clearly showed signs of distress, though Miles continued to glare at me with fiery eyes. After a tense standoff, I let out a small sigh, smiled, and stood up. "If you're all so determined, then there's nothing I can do. I'll go ahead and submit your resignation letters. Thank you for your hard work." With that, I turned and headed straight for the president's office. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of a scuffle as some employees tried to chase after me, while others were held back by Miles. I hadn't expected things to go this smoothly. I hurried toward the president's office, trying hard to suppress the laughter that was bubbling up inside me. Firing an employee for company-related reasons is a complicated process. It's difficult to find a justifiable reason for termination, and if things go wrong, it can lead to strained relations or even lawsuits. Even without those risks, there are significant downsides for the company. If it's a company-initiated termination, severance pay increases, and various subsidies can be cut off. The best solution was for Miles to resign voluntarily. But despite his countless threats of, "What would you do if I quit?" Miles had never actually intended to leave. So, this collective resignation stunt was the opportunity one had been waiting for. When I finally explained the situation to the company's president, Mr. Norris, I kept it brief, outlining only the facts. Mr. Norris, holding the 20 resignation letters in his hand, was visibly sweating. Having 20 people submit their resignation letters all at once? The company won't survive like this. Please wait. I believe what happens next will change things. Mr. Norris looked pale, but after hearing my explanation, he gradually regained his color. By the end, he even smiled as he saw me off. In the end, Miles resigned just as he had said he would. He kept complaining about me and the company until the very last moment. "I'll find another job right away, no problem. But I bet the company will be in trouble without me, right?" "You're right. Losing all 20 of you would definitely hurt." When I gave him my honest opinion, Miles smirked and continued. "I figured as much. But we're not backing down from our demands." "Demands?" As I tilted my head in confusion, Miles confidently declared, "If you want us back, you'll have to meet our demands, either a promotion or a raise. Actually, since we'd be coming back after resigning, you'll have to give us both. Are you sure about this? You're really okay with leaving the company and not regretting it?" Despite all the trouble Miles caused, he was still one of my important subordinates. Out of a final sense of consideration, I offered him some advice, but Miles just scoffed at my concern. "I understand that you're upset about losing a talented employee like me, but you're the ones who angered us in the first place," Miles said with a smug grin, puffing out his chest. "You can call us back once you realize how valuable we are. But don't take too long, or another company might snap us up." With a half laugh, Miles threw out his parting words and walked out of the office. Watching his confident figure disappear, I let out a sigh, equal parts exasperated and resigned. 1 week later, I called Miles back to the office. When I saw him again, he was dressed in a sharp suit for some reason, and his voice brimmed with barely contained excitement as he asked, "You finally called. You said you had something to discuss, so what's this about?" "Oh, I just wanted you to pick up your personal belongings. You left some things behind when you resigned." Miles glanced at the box containing his belongings, but he remained still, not moving. He kept looking at me, as if waiting for something more. I prompted him again, "What's the matter? Go ahead and take your things." Is that really all you wanted from me?" Miles stared at me with a bewildered expression, as if he had been tricked. "Yes, that's all. Make sure you get home safely." No. What is going on here?" Clearly frustrated, Miles hastily rummaged through his belongings, as if expecting something else to be hidden in the box. "What? I just didn't want your stuff lying around the office after you left. It needed to be cleared out. That's not what I meant. Isn't there something you need to talk to me about? I thought today was about rehiring me." Seeing Miles approach me in shock, I finally realized he had misunderstood the situation. It seemed Miles believed the company had fallen apart after his resignation. Then I called him back to ask him to return to his old position, or at least, that's what he thought. He must have been so confident that he would be rehired, showing up in a sharp suit. The effort he put into this misunderstanding was almost pitiable. With a firm tone, I told him clearly, "No, we're not hiring right now. We don't have any plans to rehire you." "How can you say that? If you don't rehire me now, I'm really going to move on to another company. And the other 19 employees will join me too. All I have to do is give the word." Miles's face turned red with frustration as he continued to rant. I realized that he wasn't hearing what I was saying. Though it might be hard for him to accept, it was my responsibility as his former supervisor to tell him the truth. "Listen, Miles. The other 19 employees didn't resign." "What?" Miles froze, his eyes widening in shock. No, that can't be right. They all submitted their resignation letters with me. Afterward, they all came back and withdrew their letters. You were the only one who actually resigned." As soon as Miles heard my response, his face flushed with anger. "Those guys betrayed me. It's not so much betrayal as it is that they never really intended to quit in the first place. The truth is, right after I submitted the 20 resignation letters to the president a week ago, 19 of the employees, excluding Miles, came running after me. With sweat beading on their foreheads, they all bowed and begged me to return their resignation letters. We're so sorry for causing such a fuss. We were just following Miles's lead, and we never really wanted to quit." Seeing their sincere apologies, I turned right back around and returned to the president's office. Leading the 19 employees, who looked thoroughly ashamed, I asked Mr. Norris to give their resignation letters back. When I explained the situation to Miles, he stomped his feet in frustration, clearly upset. How could they do this to me? But without the most talented person, the company is still in trouble, right? Actually, everyone has been covering your workload just fine. In fact, the team has grown more united, and efficiency has even improved. In truth, without Miles constantly complaining and underperforming, the workplace had become much livelier. Everyone had been fed up with Miles's endless grumbling, and now the atmosphere was more positive. Employees were helping each other, stepping in to cover any mistakes, and the office had a more cooperative vibe. As the workplace atmosphere improved, so did the productivity of the employees, and work began to flow more smoothly. Now, a week later, sales have actually increased compared to when Miles was still with us. Positive changes have also appeared in my own work. The time I used to spend dealing with Miles's issues has now been fully redirected to my actual responsibilities. With my focus back on sales, I managed to land the biggest deal of the past year, and the whole company is in a celebratory mood. On top of that, the new employees I've been training have finally gained enough experience to work independently. They've become valuable contributors, working hard for the company. And to top it off, our active recruitment efforts have paid off, bringing in promising new talent. So, really, there's nothing for you to worry about. You can move on and follow your own path, Miles. What? No. Are you saying there's no place for me to return to? I'm offering to come back, and I'm the best employee. Miles's voice trembled, as if he were on the verge of tears, desperately trying to persuade me. But by now, there was no spot for him at the company. If you're as talented as you say, you'll have no problem finding another job. I'm sure you'll land an even better one soon. Well, but I've worked at this company for so long. I thought I could help out as a veteran employee. Clutching the box of his belongings tightly, Miles stubbornly persisted, refusing to give up. Even as he persisted, I remained silent, and eventually, his patience snapped. Collapsing to the floor, Miles suddenly began to vent his frustrations. I never actually wanted to quit the company. I just wanted better conditions. If that's true, then you completely mishandled the negotiation. Waving around a resignation letter and making demands isn't a sincere way to negotiate. At my remark, Miles finally broke down in tears. Grabbing the hem of my suit, he began making ridiculous excuses. It's your fault, Kieran. As my boss, you should have stopped me. You should have tried harder to keep someone like me, who contributed so much to the company. The sheer audacity of his attempt to shift the blame made it clear that Miles had never really respected either the company or me. But no matter what he said, I had no intention of trying to keep him. Don't worry, you're already officially resigned. It seemed Miles finally realized that there wasn't even the slightest chance of being rehired. As he looked up at me, clinging desperately, I gave him one final push to move on. Besides, didn't you say your friend invited you to help start a new company? You should focus on that. For a moment, Miles looked confused, as if he didn't understand what I was saying. Then, as if remembering his own lie, he stood up shakily, his lips trembling. Ah, right, yes, I have a friend. Actually, we're just about to get serious about starting a company. Miles mumbled, his eyes unfocused, as he continued to ramble. He glanced at me one last time, his mouth twisting into a forced smile. Well, I guess it's good timing that I'm leaving. I'm going to join my friend's company, but you're really okay with that? From the way he was acting, it was clear that the story about his friend inviting him was a lie. But I didn't press him on it. Instead, I just said, "Good luck at your new company," and watched as Miles left the office. He's a grown professional, after all. He should be able to take responsibility for his own words. Miles staggered down the hallway and left the company for good. None of the group members who had once rallied around him even bothered to show up or see him off. That alone was proof of Miles's lack of real influence or respect. In the end, there was no news of Miles starting a company with his friend. Instead, reports trickled in that he had been frequenting the employment office, trying desperately to find work. He went to several job interviews but was rejected each time. Apparently, he demanded executive-level treatment, insisting he was a ready-made asset because of his prestigious university degree. As more companies turned him away, he eventually realized his attitude was the problem and accepted a more standard position. only to leave again after trying to negotiate with another resignation threat just 6 months later. Now, he's said to be living in shabby conditions, blowing his money from part-time jobs on gambling. Meanwhile, after Miles left, the company secured an even larger deal from the project I landed, resulting in a major contract that is expected to ensure our stability for the next 10 years. Thanks to that achievement, I'm now set to be promoted to division director. But what brings me the most joy is the positive atmosphere that has returned to the workplace. Instead of criticizing each other, we work together, always striving to do better. With this spirit, we continue to push forward, energized and productive. One of the most surprising and touching moments came when the young employee who had quit because of Miles returned. Apparently, he had been contacted by his former colleagues, who informed him that Miles was gone. When he reached out to me, asking humbly to be rehired, I was so moved that I had tears in my eyes. Today, he has grown into a reliable, senior employee who helps lead the company. I'm grateful we didn't lose such a talented worker. No matter how short-staffed we are, it's important to be careful about who we choose to work with. After all, work isn't something you accomplish alone, it's built through cooperation with your team. Moving forward, I'll continue to protect this positive work environment and make sure I recognize what truly matters. All of this is to make choices that leave no room for regret. With that resolve, I stepped into the office again today, ready for the day ahead. Hey, do you want to go for another drink? I didn't get to drink much, and I kind of feel like getting a little tipsy. Is that okay? I was tired. Even though I was tired. With those sultry eyes looking at me, there's no way I could say no. I nodded slightly and entered a nearby bar with her. My name is Travis, I'm 30 years old. As a physical therapist, I am responsible for my patients' rehabilitation. I perform treatments and support recovery for patients whose physical functions have been impaired by injury or illness, aiming to maintain and improve their abilities. I think about how to approach each case to help their bodies recover as much as possible. I plan the treatment, observe their reactions, and adjust my methods. It's a very rewarding job. During a break, while considering an approach for a patient who had ankle surgery, I felt a jolt on my shoulder. Hey! Did you watch the boxing match yesterday? It was awesome. A guy talking to me while pretending to shadowbox was my coworker Tyler, who is the same age as me. No, I didn't. My shoulder hurts, so take it easy. When I responded curtly, Tyler started acting up. Oh, seriously? Just a light tap hurts? You need to train more. Though maybe I'm just getting stronger. Tyler can be annoying when he's like this, so I decided to ignore him. Still, Tyler is the kind of guy who doesn't let up. I started going to a martial arts gym recently. See, he starts talking even if I don't ask. They said I have a good sense of it. I'll get strong quickly. If someone scary bothers you, I'll protect you. You look pretty weak, after all. I finished my lunch and stood up. Alright, then protect me if Director Owen bothers me, I said, starting to walk back to work even though there was some break time left. From behind, Tyler yelled, "That's not what I meant by scary." Even I can't defy Director Owen, making the other staff laugh. I don't like watching or doing martial arts. I can't stand seeing people in pain. That's why, in my rehabilitation, I carefully adjust the pressure and approach to ensure it doesn't cause much pain to my patients. Despite that, Tyler keeps inviting me to the martial arts gym, but I always politely decline. Maybe it's because we're the same age and he finds it easy to approach me, or maybe I'm just his target for teasing. I don't know, but Tyler often messes with me. He's probably a good guy at heart, but our hobbies don't match at all, so I wish he'd leave me alone. Travis! Wanna go to a mixer? Here he comes again. And a mixer, of all things. No. I frowned and gave a one-word response. Yeah, I thought so. That's why I'm inviting someone else. Tyler said with a peace sign and a smile. Then why ask me? Without showing any disappointment, I asked. Out of courtesy? If you were really interested, I'd ask them to add another person, Tyler replied, making me smile a bit. No need. I'm really not interested at all. With that, Tyler started getting excited with the other guys going to the mixer. A few days later, Tyler came up to me at work with a desperate look, hands clasped together. Please, Travis. Help me out. I gave him a puzzled look. Today's the mixer, but Mason caught a cold and can't make it. I need you to come. There are 3 of girl. So I need to bring 3 guys too, or it'll be rude. Honestly, I really don't want to go. As I frowned and stayed silent, Tyler added, they're nurses. Not from our hospital, but pediatric nurses. I fell in love at first sight when I took my sister's kid to the hospital. My sister worked hard to set this up, it's really important. Apparently, Tyler's sister is friends with the receptionist at the pediatric clinic, and she set up the mixer for him. Tyler once said his sister is scary, so he must have worked hard for this. Or rather, his sister did. I can't just brush this off. I'll bring everyone down. It's not that I'm not interested in women. I do want a girlfriend, and I want to get married. But I absolutely hate the vibe of mixers where you meet people for the first time. I'm shy, and there's no way I can keep up with the atmosphere or hold a conversation. Even though I said this to refuse, Tyler kept pleading, saying things like I'll keep the mood up and I won't let you down. Until I finally gave in. I'm really in my scruffy everyday clothes today. Is that okay? When I said that, Tyler's face lit up. It's fine. You're coming. Awesome. Thanks, Travis, he said and left. I got dragged into a hassle. Well, I'm a plain guy with plain looks and a plain personality. It's the trifecta. The women probably wouldn't be interested in me, and I'll find a way to leave early with some excuse. With that mindset, I focused on my work. After work, I walked into the locker room feeling heavy-hearted, and Tyler handed me a paper bag. I peeked inside and saw clothes. What's these? I asked, and Tyler gave a clumsy wink. I invited you last minute, so I bought this during lunch. Here, take it and change. Inside was a decent shirt and pants, not quite a suit but relatively smart. I can't accept this. I'll wash and return them. I said, but Tyler smiled and said, it's fine, they're a different size. True, I'm 5 feet 7 inches. Tyler, who's 6 foot, is quite a bit taller. When I offered to pay, he refused that too. I really appreciate it today. The venue is a pretty fancy private restaurant, and you'd feel out of place in scruffy clothes. So, I gratefully accepted and tried them on, and they fit perfectly. Tyler is unnecessarily thoughtful in these things. Another coworker, also dressed nicely, joined us, and we arrived at the mixer venue. It was a formal place, part of a high-end chain. If I had worn my scruffy clothes, I might have been kicked out before entering. Even dressed in a nice shirt, I didn't really want to be there. We were shown to our seats and waited nervously for the women to arrive. The seating was at a sunken, heated table with colorful woven straw mats, but I ended up sitting cross-legged. Then the lattice door opened, and 3 elegantly dressed women walked in. I thought it would be rude to stare, so I kept looking at the floor, but when I glanced at the woman sitting in front of me, I was genuinely shocked. With large, clear eyes, a straight nose, and slightly plump lips with light lipstick, she was a beauty. She was the woman I met when I was hospitalized after an injury in high school. That was 13 years ago. There's no way she would remember. Why do I remember? Because I fell in love with her, left the hospital without confessing my feelings, and parted ways. Her smile has been stuck in my mind for these 13 years. We introduced ourselves. Her name was Amy. It matched the name I remembered. I honestly don't remember the other women, but it seemed like Tyler's crush was the woman sitting to Amy's left, as he kept talking to her. She seemed gentle and kind. I pretended to look down while watching Amy's every move. This makes me just a creepy guy. Tyler, of all people, noticed my nervousness. This guy's shy. He'll get used to it soon, so bear with him, and you're nervous. Should you down a strong drink? He teased. Please, just stop. Instead of bothering with me, Tyler should focus on approaching the woman he's interested in. I thought. He was probably nervous too. By paying attention to me, he was trying to keep his composure. Also, arguing back would only dampen the mood. I could only make small talk with Amy while dodging Tyler's teasing. As we passed the time like this, the lattice door to our private room suddenly opened. I thought it was a server, but it wasn't. A burly man was leaning against the door. With tan skin and a beard, his eyes were completely glazed over. Maybe because the room was warm or because he was drunk, his muscles bulged under his tight short-sleeved shirt, and his neck was thick. Everyone in the room was scared by his appearance. Is this the wrong room? Tyler barely managed to respond, yes. I thought he would leave, but... Oh. Wow, 3 beauties. Mind if I join, he said, stumbling in. He seemed very drunk. The man wedged himself between Amy and Tyler's crush and started talking to them. Tyler quietly left. He was probably going to get a server. I wanted to wait for that. But I couldn't wait for Tyler to return with a server. Because the man wrapped his arm around Amy's shoulder and brought his dirty face close to her beautiful one. Amy's face froze in fear, her eyes teary. The moment I saw that, I stood up and swiftly moved behind the man. Sorry. With that one word, I grabbed the arm around Amy's shoulder, pulled it towards me, and trapped the man's body with my legs. The man let out a strange noise. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologized while locking him in a hold he couldn't escape from. The man groaned in pain, trying to break free. I'm sorry. Please don't resist. It'll hurt more if you do. The man managed to gasp out, "Who are you?" But I just kept apologizing. I don't like seeing people in pain. As I held him in place, Tyler came rushing back. I brought someone from the same group and a server. Behind Tyler were 3 burly men who looked like the drunk guy and a flustered server. A few minutes later, the drunk man, sobered up by my hold, bowed his head. The other members of his group also bowed deeply. The group offered to cover our bill as an apology, and although we declined, they insisted, saying let us pay as a matter of honor. And took the bill, a bit unsteady. Just before leaving, the man turned back. I'm pretty strong in wrestling, but who are you really? I tried to brush it off, but Tyler looked at me and asked, Travis, what's going on? And everyone else's eyes were also on me. I couldn't dodge it any longer. I did judo for a long time. Until about my sophomore year of high school. To put it simply, I'm a black belt. Everyone gasped in admiration, and the drunk man said, I see, and left. As the room quieted down, Tyler muttered, You're amazing, then exclaimed excitedly. Wow! You're strong. That's awesome. I look lame now, even though I'm weaker than you. Seeing Tyler go from excitement to dejection, I looked at him. I think you're the amazing one, Tyler. Tyler's face looked a bit funny as if asking, How so? You got clothes for me and went out first to get help. It must have taken a lot of courage to act in that situation. I want to be as thoughtful as you. Tyler always bothers me because I usually stay by myself at work. While I prefer being alone, Tyler probably sees me as isolated. His frequent attempts to talk to me are his way of being kind. Since Tyler's crush was watching, I decided to give him some credit. Thanks for always looking out for me. You're kind and thoughtful, and because of you, work is fun. I hoped these words would make his crush think better of him. As I watched Tyler blush and get excited, I thought about that. Tyler managed to get us to a second party at a karaoke place. However, I declined, saying I was tired. I don't like singing, so karaoke is torture for me. But I did gather some courage. I exchanged contact info with Amy. I even managed to ask if she had a boyfriend, and she said no, so I hope to get closer to her slowly. Smiling to myself, I walked towards the station, hearing the sound of high heels approaching. I turned around to see Amy running towards me. Surprised, I ran to meet her. What's wrong? Did you forget something? I call out to Amy, who was breathing rough from running. She said, I remembered. My eyes widened. You were the judo boy I was assigned to as a nursing student, right? I was taken aback. I didn't realize it. I'm usually good with faces. You had a buzz cut back then. You noticed me, didn't you? caught red-handed, I was surprised. I thought you were glancing at me. When I remembered, it all made sense. Your gaze wasn't one of interest but asking, "Do you remember me?" I wondered if I had such a wistful gaze. "You managed to get your father's approval, right?" she said, and I thanked her. "Yes. Thanks to your encouragement back then." She laughed. "I didn't do much." "Hey, how about we go for another drink?" I didn't get to drink much, and I skipped the second party. I kind of feel like getting a little tipsy. Is that okay? I was tired. But, with those sultry eyes looking at me, there's no way I could say no. I nodded slightly and entered a nearby bar with her. We sat at the counter, side by side. We were so close our shoulders almost touched. My heart was pounding loudly. Meeting like this, after more than 10 years. I was a student back then, so I was 21. She started the conversation, and I added, I was a sophomore in high school, hospitalized for a ligament rupture. Back then, while lying in the hospital bed, a scary nurse came in and introduced a cute woman with big eyes, saying she was a student and would be my caretaker. I agreed immediately. The dull hospital life felt suddenly brightened. She came to my room twice a day, in the morning and evening, to check my temperature, pulse, and blood pressure. Sometimes, she informed me of changes in my rehab schedule. It was just that, but she talked to me a bit each time, and we grew a little closer. As my discharge approached and I confessed I didn't want to leave, she listened to me kindly. I had been doing judo since I was a kid. My father had been practicing judo since he was a child, and in Japan, where judo originated, it's common for police officers to incorporate it into their training. Using his experience, he became a police officer. However, I had always disliked judo. I hated getting hurt and hurting others. With my father being strict, quitting judo was not an option. With no way out, I chose to become stronger. To avoid getting hurt by others. And to win quickly without hurting my opponent. Though I couldn't do that against my father, my desperate training led me to win tournaments and eventually earn a black belt. Just as I was being seen as a promising athlete, I got injured. In my rebellious phase, I pushed myself too hard during training with my father. Before he could stop me, I injured my leg, resulting in a severe ligament tear. This led to my first extended break from training. During this hospitalization, I genuinely felt I never wanted to do judo again. I feared that once I returned home, I would be pushed to aim higher while doing rehab. And pressured to become a police officer like my father. I didn't want to leave the hospital. I didn't want to go home. When I confessed this, Amy scolded me. "You're a guy. Don't be so pathetic." Expecting comfort, her unexpected words stunned me into silence. The tears that were about to fall receded. "You have to become truly strong. You need to surpass your father. It's your life, isn't it? If you can't change yourself here, you'll live your life walking on the path your father laid out for you. Don't just go with the flow." I was dumbfounded. And I thought about it. A life running along the path my father had laid out. I clearly didn't want that. My face must have changed because Amy smiled. "Do your best. I'm rooting for you." Fueled by her smile, I faced my father. After being discharged, I told my parents how I felt. That I wanted to retire from judo. That I hated the pain it caused me and others. That I wanted to become a physical therapist instead of a police officer. During my hospitalization, I received a lot of help from physical therapists. They considered my needs first and tailored my rehab plans. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to use the body I had trained through judo to help others. Though I stuttered at times, I confessed this, but my father wouldn't accept it. He said I couldn't quit judo until I defeated him. However, my ligament would take a long time to fully recover. When my mother, in tears, asked what would happen if I forced myself to train and ended up unable to walk, my father relented and gave me another condition. No half measures. If you really want to be a physical therapist, aim for one of these universities. The list he handed me included only top-tier schools. He wanted to see how serious I was. At the time, my grades were nowhere near good enough to even get halfway to those schools. It is as if there is a target that is visible but far away. But I studied frantically. With no judo practice, I had plenty of time. I dedicated all my time to studying. During that period, I set my sights on one university. Of course, the university I chose allowed me to study relevant subjects, and I also resonated with its philosophy. Motivated by my desire to attend this university, I studied intensely from the summer of my second year of high school and was accepted into my target university. I think my father eventually accepted my goal. To be honest, he might have feared that I would stop studying altogether. The snacks and drinks he occasionally brought me showed that he genuinely supported me. When I finished telling Amy about how I surpassed my father, she looked at me with teary eyes and said, "That's amazing, you really worked hard. That university is truly prestigious. I respect you," and she applauded me. "Your words changed me, Amy," I said, looking straight into her eyes. She fidgeted and said, "I feel bad, so I'll tell you, those words were like me talking to myself." Surprised, I listened as Amy shared her story. She revealed that becoming a nurse was also her parents' suggestion, with good benefits and plenty of job opportunities. It seemed like a practical choice, and she followed that path without much question. But because it wasn't her own decision, she started to slack off. Especially during her internship, she felt useless, made many mistakes, and was constantly reprimanded by her supervisor. Meeting me during those days, when she wished for time to pass quickly and the internship to end soon, she tried to prolong our conversations to avoid spending time at the nurse's station. While telling you those things, I was actually trying to motivate myself. I was questioning if I was just following the path my parents laid out for me. Watching you, I realized clearly that I didn't want that. I wanted to be someone who could empathize with patients. I decided to become a nurse not because my parents wanted me to, but because I chose to. The person I needed to overcome was myself. She looked radiant as she spoke. Since then, Amy had worked hard to motivate herself. Eventually, she was praised by her supervisor and sent off with confidence that she would become an excellent nurse. After finishing her story, Amy, perhaps thirsty, gulped down the rest of her cocktail. "I'm currently working in pediatrics, and every day is fulfilling. I have that time to thank for not giving up, and maybe it's partly thanks to you, Travis," she said with a smile while ordering another cocktail from the bartender. She looked so beautiful that I felt dizzy, not just because of the alcohol. She clinked her glass against mine. "I think it took a lot of courage for you to use your judo skills in that fancy restaurant. You seem to have hidden the fact that you practiced judo. But, thank you for saving me. I was really scared then." With her cheeks slightly flushed, she continued, "Travis, you were really cool," she said. I took a sip of my drink to soothe my dry throat and said, "I'm glad I could help you." For the first time, I felt that it was good I did judo. Amy laughed heartily. Encouraged by the alcohol, I gathered my courage. Meeting you again here feels like fate. So, even if it's just as friends, would you go out with me?" My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my whole body had become a heart. As she looked at me and smiled, Amy's face moved closer to mine. I felt a soft sensation on my cheek. Then Amy's face slowly moved away. She had a mischievous expression. "Actually, I'm quite impatient and proactive. I'm not planning on taking it slow, so be prepared," she declared with a wink. "If I don't step up my game, I won't be able to keep up with her." I vowed to become a reliable man. A few years later. One more time. My 3-year-old son, lying down and almost crying, shouted while looking at the ceiling. "Again?" "I'm getting tired, let's stop soon," I suggested, but he shook his head vigorously. "One more time." At that moment, Amy walked in. Okay, I brought snacks, so let's take a break," she said, and my son, forgetting about wanting another match, rushed to the less sweet muffins Amy had made. After being freed from my son, Amy laughed and said, "Good job, offering me a muffin." It's been 4 years since Amy and I got married. I struggled with the idea of teaching judo to my son, but deep down, judo is a fundamental part of me. It gave me the strength to protect. It also taught me patience. My explosive focus is thanks to judo. And most importantly, my self-confidence comes from having the strength that judo gave me. If I were just weak, I wouldn't have been able to endure Tyler's teasing. The soft heart instilled in me by judo gave me the strength to brush off Tyler's teasing. I want my son to develop that same mindset, so after discussing with Amy, we decided to teach our son judo. Unlike me, he's got a strong competitive spirit. He'll probably be good at judo. Dad would be happy. My father, now a doting grandfather, spoils my son with a soft gaze. It's hard to believe he was ever so scary. He got his competitive spirit from me, Amy said, smiling at our son. Her smile was dazzling. I placed my hand on Amy's swollen belly. I hope this one will be kind like me. Amy laughed heartily. Listening to her laughter echo through the small room, I realized how truly happy I was. I felt the same way she did. Despite it being our first meeting, we got along perfectly. I'm Henry, a 38-year-old single man. I've been working as a French lecturer at a private college, and recently, I was promoted to associate professor. My fascination with France began when I read a biography of Napoleon in elementary school. I still vividly remember being thrilled as a child by Napoleon's journey from his small island of Corsica to become an emperor through hard work. During my college years, I visited France for the first time through a homestay program. Seeing the Palace of Versailles, where Napoleon held his coronation, felt like a scene from history coming to life. Unable to forget that moment, I went on to graduate school and began researching the history of the French Revolution. Currently, while continuing my research, I teach French to students. Even during the summer break, I'm busy writing papers every day. However, since my sister and her husband's restaurant is busiest during this time, I help out there on Friday and Saturday nights during the summer break. My sister, Emily, who is 5 years younger than me, worriedly asked, "Are you sure it's okay to help us with the new semester preparations coming up?" Yes, it's fine. Sitting and writing papers all the time can get overwhelming, so it's a good change of pace to move around. Plus, I owe you and Nate so much, let me repay you sometimes. Actually, Nate, my sister's husband, has been my best friend since college and has always looked out for me even after marrying Emily. Knowing I tend to neglect my diet due to my busy work schedule, Nate often brings me delicious food, for which I am truly grateful. When I expressed my gratitude, Emily smiled warmly and said, "Thank you." Wanting to help Emily and Nate as much as possible, I happily assisted at the restaurant, but in reality, I was troubled by a certain male customer. This man, named George, who is the same age as me, visited the restaurant every Friday evening. As soon as he burst through the door and spotted Emily, he loudly called out to her, "Here I am again. By the way, every time I come here, there are hardly any customers. Are you sure the business is doing all right?" Our restaurant is a small place with 4 tables and 5 seats by the counter, and at that time, George was the only customer. Other regulars had started coming at different times to avoid George's noisy visits on Friday evenings. Of course, we couldn't say that to George, so Emily responded with a polite smile, "Thanks to you, we are doing fine." Not wanting to burden Emily with George any longer, I suggested she move to the kitchen, and I took George's order. "Thank you for coming again. Are you ready to order?" "Well, I'll have a draft beer for now." "But Henry, don't you feel embarrassed working here out of pity from your sister and her husband?" George smirked at me as he said this. It seems he thought I was working part-time here because we had met 3 weeks in a row. Explaining the situation felt tedious, so I just went along with it. As usual, George started bragging about his job while sipping his beer. "Actually, I'm going to France for work next year. So, starting next month, I might not be able to come here as often." "Oh, really?" I speak not only Japanese and English, but also French, German, and Chinese. An elite employee at a major trading company needs to be that proficient. It's probably a world unimaginable to a part-timer like you. Being trilingual myself, I was genuinely impressed by George's claim of speaking 5 languages. "That's impressive." I praised him, which pleased George and prompted him to order lots of food and drink. Getting happily drunk before leaving the restaurant about 2 hours later. As I was cleaning up George's leftovers, Emily voiced her concern. "Are you all right? It seemed like he was really bothering you again." "He started coming here about 3 months ago, and honestly, Nate and I don't know how to handle him. But we can't exactly tell him not to come either. Don't worry about me. I just go with the flow. Besides, George said he'll be coming less frequently from next month due to work. Emily furrowed her brows but said, if you say so. Dealing with George was indeed stressful, but I thought it would only be for a little while longer. Then, one day, towards the end of summer break, George made me an offer. Hey Henry, I bet you're free tomorrow, right? There's a mixer with some nurses, come with me. I was taken aback by the unexpected invitation, but George, already drunk, kept insisting, do you know how much money I've spent at this place? While pounding the table. Fearing he might cause more trouble for Emily and Nate, I reluctantly agreed. Satisfied with my agreement, George said, all right, see you tomorrow, and left the restaurant cheerfully. I had planned to help out at the restaurant the next night, but I couldn't back out of the promise now. When I told Nate and Emily in the kitchen about how I ended up being invited to the mixer, they were both shocked. Wow! George really is a selfish person. I'm speechless, Emily said, exasperated. Sorry about not being able to help out tomorrow like I planned, I said. Don't worry about the restaurant. It's been calmer lately, and we'll manage. Besides, it's a mixer, Henry. You should go and have fun. I bet you'll meet someone special. Nate encouraged me. Indeed, it might be a good opportunity. After not having a girlfriend for over 10 years, I had been thinking it was time to meet someone new. Taking Nate's advice, I decided to give the mixer my best shot. I thanked Emily and Nate and worked enthusiastically that night. The next day, I headed to the Italian bar George had specified. But as soon as I entered, I was taken aback. George had told me, even though it's a bar, it's a proper place, so wear a suit, but I was the only one who showed up in a suit. The bar had a casual atmosphere, and everyone else was in their regular clothes. The bar, known for its fusion of Italian and Japanese cuisine, had a decor that mixed both styles. Wine glasses made of lacquerware and Venetian glass vases with artificial cherry blossoms decorated the interior, giving it a playful touch. Usually, I would have enjoyed such a setting, but I felt out of place in my formal attire. Looking around, I saw George and the other participants already seated at a round table. Although I had arrived 10 minutes before the appointed time, I felt something was off. As I stood there, puzzled, George spotted me, pointed, and started laughing. Henry! Come on, man. I get that you're excited about the mixer, but showing up 20 minutes late in a suit? That's a fail for a grown-up. George said that and laughed exaggeratedly by himself. At that moment, I realized George's true intention. He had deliberately told me to wear inappropriate attire and given me the wrong meeting time. He probably invited me to the mixer just to make a fool out of me. As I stood there in shock, one of the female participants spoke up. No, not at all. I think his suit looks very nice. And George, it's not right to point and laugh at someone at a fun gathering, she said sharply. Chastised by the woman, George looked embarrassed and began to defend himself. Come on, Laura. I was just joking a bit. Henry. Just take a seat. It's your fault for being late in the first place. It seemed George didn't like being reprimanded by Laura. He glared at me, almost as if he was taking out his frustration. Perhaps Laura was the one he had his eye on tonight. Indeed, she was the most beautiful among the 5 female participants. She had big, well-defined eyes, a sculpted face, and curly brown hair, giving her an exotic allure. Her brightly colored dress suited her perfectly. Sorry, I said, bowing my head to George. Seeing an empty seat next to Laura, I quickly sat down beside her and thanked her. Thank you for earlier. I felt a bit out of place in my suit, but your support helped. She smiled warmly at me. You're welcome. It really suits you. I'm Laura. Nice to meet you. I'm Henry. Nice to meet you too. The introductions had already been done before I arrived, and the participants were chatting freely. So, I decided to enjoy my meal while talking with Laura. Through our conversation, I learned that Laura was 30 years old and worked as a nurse at X hospital. Her clear and confident way of speaking made me like her naturally. Despite her stunning looks, she was approachable and kind, embodying the ideal qualities of a nurse. Suddenly, George moved his chair to forcibly squeeze in between Laura and me. He seemed determined to talk to her. "Laura, you shouldn't waste your time talking to Henry." "George, I already told you to stop looking down on people like that." However, Laura seemed uninterested in engaging with George. She likely disliked how he constantly belittled me. In fact, when I arrived late, none of the other members had laughed at me like George did, and now George was isolated in the group. Realizing this, George became more desperate to put me down. "Laura, he's 38 and working part-time at his sister's restaurant. Don't you think I'm way more reliable than him?" he insisted. Annoyed by his words, I was about to retort. But just then, there was a loud crash in the bar, and I instinctively looked towards the sound. To my shock, there was a woman collapsed on the floor, with her husband crouched beside her, panicking. The bar staff were trying to communicate with him, but since he was a foreigner, they couldn't understand each other. Seeing this, Laura said, "George, you're a multilingual, right? Can't you help translate?" George hesitated but replied weakly, "Of course," and approached the foreign man. The man, who seemed to be in his 50s, started speaking in heavily accented English, influenced by his native French. However, the accent was too strong for George to understand clearly. Even though he went to translate, George stood there bewildered, saying, "I don't understand." Unable to watch any longer, I stood up and moved beside George. George snapped, "Stay out of this." Ignoring him, I addressed the man in French, "What happened?" The man, relieved, began to explain the details in French. He said that his wife felt unwell after drinking wine and needed an ambulance immediately. I translated this to the female staff, who promptly called 119, saying, "Thank you so much." Laura then approached and offered, "I'm a nurse, so I can help if needed." The staff, reassured by having a medical professional on hand, handed the phone to Laura. While Laura communicated with the emergency services, I continued to translate the man's explanations to her. "Where are you, and what's the emergency?" "We're at an Italian bar, and a female foreigner is feeling unwell. She skipped her usual blood pressure medication this morning before going to the hot springs. According to her husband, she spent a long time in the hot springs, and after drinking a glass of wine at the bar, she felt unwell and collapsed from her chair." Hearing this, Laura relayed the woman's medical history and situation to the paramedics. While waiting for the ambulance, Laura asked the staff for something to place under the woman to ensure her safety. The staff quickly brought a mattress from the office room. Laura and I moved the woman's body onto the mattress, and Laura positioned her in the recovery position to secure her airway. I'm laying her on her side to keep her airway open. I immediately translated Laura's words to the husband. He understood the situation and, with tears in his eyes, repeatedly said, "Thank you." Soon, the ambulance arrived, and the woman was swiftly transported to the hospital. As I translated Laura's words to the husband, the bar quieted down as if a storm had passed. Laura and I were thanked by all the bar staff, who said, "You saved us," as we headed back to the table where the mixer was taking place. There, George, who had been keeping a low profile until now, nervously sweating, asked me, "Henry, who are you?" "Actually, I'm a French language lecturer and recently became an associate professor." An associate professor. He had always looked down on me, thinking I was just a part-timer, never imagining I was an associate professor. The other participants praised me, saying, "That's amazing. You spoke French so fluently, Henry." It was really impressive. "No, not at all. Laura, you were amazing as well. As expected of a nurse." As we exchanged compliments, the other participants started clapping and cheering, saying, "You two make a great team." I never expected things to turn out this way. Feeling embarrassed, I scratched my head, blushing. While Laura and I received applause for our teamwork, George suddenly stood up roughly and said, "I'm leaving," before storming out of the bar. For a moment, the room fell silent due to George's abrupt departure. One of George's colleagues then spoke up. George probably didn't like seeing Henry speak French better than him. He has a big ego and always wants to look good. But his practical language skills aren't that great. Honestly, I'm not even sure if he really is multilingual. Everyone nodded in agreement with the colleague's assessment. I had the same impression. George always needed to be the center of attention. Today, he invited me with the intention of belittling me, but ended up embarrassing himself instead. Thinking about it, George seemed rather pitiable. The rest of the evening went smoothly, and we enjoyed the mixer with smiles all around. I exchanged contact information with Laura, making the night a great success. After that mixer, Laura and I started dating. I had found her attractive and wonderful from the moment we met, but our shared experience of contacting the paramedics brought us closer together. When I confessed my feelings, she told me, "Watching you handle everything so fluently in French, I was instantly captivated. It's never happened to me before." Now that I'm dating such an amazing woman, I feel genuinely grateful to George for providing the opportunity. However, since that mixer, George hasn't visited Emily and Nate's restaurant, so I haven't seen him to express my thanks. I wondered if he was busy preparing for his business trip to France, but it seems that story was just another fabrication. In hindsight, it seems belittling me at Emily's restaurant was the only thing that gave George a sense of superiority. By the way, the French couple we encountered that night at the mixer visited the bar again once the wife had recovered. The husband left a letter for me with the staff before they returned to France. The organizer of the mixer contacted me, and we arranged a meeting where he handed me the letter. Nervously, I opened it to find a photo of the smiling couple. "Thank you so much for your help the other day. Thanks to your translation, my wife has fully recovered. We also want to thank your nurse girlfriend again. Please, both of you come visit us in France. My wife and I would love to show you around." I showed the letter to Laura, and she smiled with joy. They thought we were a couple back then. I've decided. Our honeymoon destination should be France. Wait, Laura, does that mean? I asked, and Laura, blushing, gently took my hand. I don't want to let go of this hand. I thought instinctively, and with that momentum, I proposed to her, "Marry me." 1 year after meeting Laura. Laura and I were at Charles de Gaulle Airport together. In the distance, we saw the couple waving at us. Seeing them, Laura smiled and waved back, her engagement ring sparkling as if predicting the wonderful journey that was about to begin. I'm going to transfer schools. Iris's eyes widened at my words. Then, a sad expression appeared on her face. No, it can't be. Seeing her reaction, I decided to go for it. I ripped the second button off my uniform. It's a year early, but please take it. I held the second button tightly in my fist and extended it toward her. I looked straight at Iris. Iris brought her hand to her mouth, and then shed tears. I'm sorry. I was completely shocked. My name is Harry. I'm 30 years old. Currently, I'm outside, having stepped out of my high school reunion for a moment. Our high school has an interesting tradition. When graduates turn 30, a reunion is held in the school gym. The current students prepare for it. It starts in the evening and goes on until night. Simple snacks are provided, but generally, each alumnus brings something. Alcohol is not allowed. I've been having a great time with my friends, reminiscing and enjoying ourselves. But the person I really want to see is still surrounded by people, and I haven't had a chance to talk to her yet. So nostalgic. Standing in front of the big cherry tree next to the gym, I reminisced about my high school days. In high school, I was an average student. I didn't study much for tests. Just by listening in class, I could score around 80. For me, not having high aspirations, it was a satisfactory score. One day, I had forgotten to bring a homework assignment that was due that day, so I went home to get it. Walking down the hallway to the staff room, I saw a girl looking worried. It was Iris. She was at the top of our class every year and was also very pretty. She was flawless. She was someone I thought I'd never have any connection with. No way, has Mr. Austin already left? She mentioned the math teacher's name with a troubled look. The teacher she asked offered to call another math teacher, but she shook her head and turned to leave, passing by me. A pleasant, floral scent wafted in the air. It was probably her shampoo or conditioner. Feeling a bit lucky, I went into the staff room, handed in my assignment, got a bit of a lecture, and then left. Walking down the hallway, I saw something on the floor. I picked it up and realized it was a student ID. It had Iris written on it. I checked the shoe lockers and saw her shoes were still there. This meant she was still in the school. I debated leaving the student ID in the shoe locker and going home. But it felt a bit wrong, so I headed toward the classroom. I was in class 1, she was in class 3. I decided to check the classrooms and the library, and if I didn't find her, I would leave the ID in the shoe locker. Peeking into class 3, I saw Iris with her head in her hands. I quietly entered the classroom and said, She looked up at me. Her eyes were shining with tears. Iris quickly wiped them away and looked at me. What? Pretending not to notice her tears, I walked over and placed the student ID on her desk. I found this. Oh, I dropped it. Thank you. Iris examined the student ID and thanked me. No problem, I'm glad you were still here. Just as I was about to leave, a paper on her desk caught my eye. Math? When I asked, Iris nodded. I just can't figure it out. The paper wasn't the usual school handout but a plain white sheet. It's not a school assignment, is it? Iris nodded. It's homework from my cram school. A quick glance revealed that the problems looked tough. Why don't you ask your cram school teacher if you don't understand? When I offered this sensible suggestion, her face clouded over. My dad checks it before I go. If I can't solve it, he gets mad. So that's what it's like to be the parent of the top student. I was impressed. So you were looking for Mr. Austin, the math teacher. Couldn't another teacher help? I asked out of genuine curiosity, and she looked down a bit. I'm scared of teachers I don't know. Indeed, we rarely interacted with teachers from other grades, and they did seem a bit intimidating. A silence fell between us. I thought about just leaving. But I couldn't ignore the worried look on her face. Can I take a look? Iris looked at me skeptically. Her expression seemed to say, there's no way you can solve it. But I was good at math. The problem involved inequalities and was a word problem. It was quite complex. Thinking it through in my head was tricky. Do you mind if I use the blackboard? I walked over to the blackboard and started writing equations with the chalk. Wait, this method won't work. Oh, I need to set up the equation from the conclusion? Muttering to myself. I solved it in about 3 minutes. Does this look right? Iris tilted her head. I don't know, there's no answer key. How did you solve it? Iris, still sitting at her desk, came over to the blackboard and stood next to me. The same pleasant scent from earlier made my heart race a little. Well, you see. I explained the equations on the blackboard, and her face lit up. Her smile made my teenage heart flutter. Wow. I get it. I think that's correct. Amazing. As I was admiring her smile, she took my hand. Thank you. Harry. Thank you. You're really smart to solve a problem like this. She read my name embroidered on my chest pocket, thanked me, and complimented me. Then Iris looked at the clock. Oh no. It's already this late. I have to go, or I'll get in trouble. See you, Harry. Help me again if I need it. She said this quickly and hurried out of the classroom. I stood there, feeling the lingering warmth of her hand, unable to move for a while. Though my motivation was impure, I started studying hard from that day on, so that I could answer any question Iris might ask me. However, since she rarely had trouble, my efforts were mostly in vain, but my grades skyrocketed. Even so, I never reached the top of the class. I was not good at Japanese and social studies. In our second year, we ended up in the same class. We didn't talk much, but during the committee selection in April, I was nominated for vice chair. And Iris was nominated for chair. I accepted the nomination for vice chair, somewhat reluctantly, while Iris took the role of chair as if it were natural. She seemed to care about her report card. One day, when I was late because of the committee meeting, I decided to ask her something I had been wondering about. Hey, why do you always work so hard? She frowned. It's not a happy story. I nodded. Even if it wasn't happy, I wanted to know her reason. My parents are bureaucrats who graduated from Tokyo University. My eyes widened. That's amazing. Lacking vocabulary, that was all I could say. Isn't it? My older brother is also very smart. When I heard the name of the high school her brother attended, I was even more surprised. That's the top school in the prefecture. Iris nodded. I want to go to the same high school as my brother, then go to Tokyo University, and eventually marry someone who graduated from Tokyo University. Otherwise, I'll be abandoned. Despite being naturally bright, she worked hard every day. I understand aiming for Tokyo University, but planning to marry someone from there, isn't that a bit early to think about? I said, and she smiled wryly. Yeah, I guess. But I've been told that all my life, if I don't find someone from there, I can't get married. There was a hint of self-deprecation in her laugh. What about universities better than Tokyo University? I asked, and she furrowed her eyebrows. It's the best university in Japan, you know? I laughed at her words. True, but what about abroad? Like Harvard, Stanford, or Oxford? Iris's eyes widened at my words. I never thought about that. I smiled slightly. I don't think education is everything. If your perspective is narrow, your future choices will be limited too. Iris gave a faint smile. Yeah, but for now, my goal is Tokyo University. I want to become a bureaucrat and support the country from behind the scenes like my parents. I was amazed at her grand dream. Then maybe I'll go to Harvard and become a politician, eventually the prime minister. Would that satisfy Iris's parents? Just kidding. Iris blushed slightly at my casual remark. Does that mean? Just as the atmosphere was getting a bit romantic. Hey! It's time to go home. A teacher who had spotted us called out from a distance. We quickly responded, and my moment of courage was left unresolved as we headed home. From then on, we remained more than friends but less than lovers. Or so I thought. At least, that was my perception at the time. In the second term, we continued as chair and vice chair, occasionally studying together after school. While I mostly hung out with boys and Iris with girls, the girl I talked to the most was Iris. And I believe I was the boy she talked to the most as well. On days with committee meetings, we would leave school together, walk out the gate, and part ways at the first intersection. From there, we headed in different directions. If only we were closer to each other's homes. There were times when I thought that. One day, as we were about to head home together, Iris glanced at the cherry tree next to the gym. Hey, did you know? There's a legend that couples who exchange the ribbon of a girl's school uniform and the second button of a boy's under this cherry tree on graduation day will get married. Not being familiar with such superstitions, I was genuinely intrigued. Wow, marriage, huh? So this cherry tree must be really popular on graduation day. At our middle school graduation ceremony, the second-year students attended as current students, but the first-year students stayed home. I thought I would check out the cherry tree after the graduation ceremony, but Iris shook her head. Actually, today's students are too shy to do that publicly. It's kind of sad. She glanced at me. If someone did something that romantic, even if I didn't like him, I'd probably say yes. My heart skipped a beat. Could this mean I should get my hopes up? Is she subtly telling me to invite her under the cherry tree on graduation day? If so, I needed to study even harder to get into Harvard. After all, her parents wouldn't approve of anyone less than a Tokyo University graduate. To make a promise under the cherry tree on graduation day, I had to get into Harvard. Motivated by this impure intention, I threw myself into my studies even more. However, those days came to an abrupt end. My father was transferred. It was a transfer to a city far away from my hometown. I found out at the end of my second year, on the first day of March. I realized I would no longer see Iris. When my father told me about the transfer, my vision went dark for a moment. But I'm going to confess. I made up my mind. On the day of the third-year graduation ceremony. After the ceremony, we, the second-year students, clean up the gym. Then, I would walk home with her and give her the second button. I nervously prepared for the graduation ceremony, spent the ceremony feeling anxious. Finally, after the ceremony, during the cleanup, I lied, "Could you help me with some studying afterward, to stay a bit longer at school?" Once all the students were gone, we left. Passing by the cherry tree, I suddenly stopped. Iris, who was walking ahead, turned around. What's wrong? My heart was racing. I'm transferring. Iris's eyes widened at my words. Then, her expression turned sad. No, it can't be. Seeing her reaction, I decided to go for it. I ripped the second button off my uniform. It's a year early, but please take this. I held the second button tightly in my fist and extended it toward her. I looked straight at Iris. Iris brought her hand to her mouth, and tears started to flow. I'm sorry. I was completely shocked. Hadn't she implied that if I confessed, she might say yes even if she didn't like me? Was it because it wasn't the actual graduation day? My thoughts were spinning, but I managed to speak. Oh. I see. I'm sorry. Iris, seeing my distress, looked troubled. I'm sorry, but... She seemed to be searching for a reason to reject me. Part of me wanted to know, but part of me didn't. For her sake, I should let go. I knew that. But even though I had been rejected, I wanted to stay with her a bit longer. Iris glanced at the gym. Did you know that every year, the graduates from here have a reunion when they turn 30? The conversation took a strange turn, and I was puzzled. Huh? Oh, yeah, I know, we have to help with the preparations, so what about it? I looked at Iris, but she kept her gaze on the gym. When we're 30, if we're both still single. She paused and then looked directly at me. Let's exchange then. She gave me a big smile. I'm definitely going to Tokyo University, so... Harry, you go to Harvard. Promise. This promise made me feel like we had formed a bond. Got it. Iris. I'll make it happen. We walked home. It was a bit awkward, but I spent the remaining days before my transfer just like normal with Iris. They are very precious memories. And now, here I am at 30, standing under the cherry tree. As I reminisced, I heard the sound of heels approaching. Turning around, I saw Iris walking toward me in a blue dress. Iris. The wind gently rustled her dress. I finally managed to get away. She gave a slight smile. You achieved your dream. You went to Tokyo University, became a bureaucrat, and even became Miss Tokyo University? Congratulations. I said this with a gentle smile, and Iris responded with a soft laugh. Thank you. It's been hectic, but I'm doing well. How about you? I haven't heard a thing about you. I even asked everyone about Harry. But no one knew anything. I looked down a bit. I'd been keeping my background hidden. Iris tilted her head. Why? I hesitated a bit but answered honestly. When I say I'm from Harvard, people's reactions change, and it makes me uncomfortable. Iris's eyes widened. So, you really went to Harvard? I slowly nodded. Yes, I had also fulfilled my middle school dream. After intense studying, I got into the top high school in the area, and during high school, I actively participated in events that allowed me to communicate with people from abroad. My 3 years of hard work paid off, and I was awarded a scholarship to Harvard University. College life was stimulating. Everything I saw and heard was full of energy. Having achieved my goal of getting into Harvard, I went through a period of feeling aimless. As I attended university, more and more things I wanted to do kept coming to mind. Among these thoughts, Iris was always on my mind. Iris, who wanted to become a bureaucrat and work for the country. What could I do for my country? I had thought about becoming a politician back in middle school. But I realized it wasn't for me. One person's power alone isn't enough. What could be the pillars supporting the country? As I pondered this, an idea came to me. I graduated from Harvard and returned to Japan. Now, I work as a business consultant during the day and run a non-profit organization that provides free tutoring to children at night. Iris's eyes widened at my words. The foundation of a country's support is its tax revenue, right? For that revenue to increase, businesses need to earn more. That's why I work as a consultant. And at night, I run a tutoring center for children who can't afford to study properly. These kids will shape the future of Japan. Iris gave a small applause. That's amazing, truly wonderful. Her words made me blush. Then, I pulled something out of my pocket. I haven't asked if you're seeing someone. I can't imagine a Miss Tokyo University being single. But today, I want you to take this. I extended my fist toward Iris. She held out her right hand beneath my fist. Out of my fist fell the second button from my middle school uniform. The button she once refused to accept. After that failed confession, I couldn't bring myself to put it back on my uniform, so I kept it with care all these years. I remembered how I had attached a spare button in place of the second one so my parents wouldn't notice. Thank you. I'm happy. Maybe she didn't have a boyfriend. Maybe we could finally become a couple. Filled with hope, I saw Iris smirk. But my ribbon. I won't give it to you that easily. Her unexpected response made me brace myself. If you can answer 4 of my questions correctly, I'll give it to you. The unexpected twist left me bewildered. First question. Leaving me stunned, Iris posed her first question. What do you think of the current politics in Japan? I was taken aback. Does that even have a right answer? At my question, Iris tilted her head and smiled. She didn't seem interested in answering. I shared my opinion with her. Iris smiled, seemingly satisfied. Okay, second question. What's the solution to global warming? Another tough question. It was a huge challenge. Thinking hard and recalling what I learned in university, I managed to come up with an answer. Iris nodded along. It was hard to tell if I was right or wrong. Alright, third question. Once again, it was a question with no clear right answer. And then. Okay, the fourth question. Iris looked up at me. How many guys have I dated so far? The sudden change in direction of the question threw me off. Well. I hoped the answer was 0. But that was unlikely. She was Miss Tokyo University, after all. She was pretty, with excellent communication skills. 1. I'd be jealous of that guy. If it were more, I wouldn't like that either. You have 10 seconds left. The sudden time limit made me panic. 3. Iris made a dramatic frown. Wrong. Now you're out of chances. Here's the final question. She didn't tell me the correct answer. While I was bewildered, Iris took a step closer to me. Do I still love you? Her question made my heart race. What did she mean by still? Had she ever liked me before? I had confessed before transferring, but she rejected me. However, she left the possibility open for when we turned 30. I gathered my courage. Yes. I stammered a bit but looked straight at Iris and answered. Iris stared at me without changing her expression. Final answer? With a mischievous look, she dragged out the moment. What was the answer? My heart was pounding loudly. I wanted the answer quickly. As I swallowed nervously, Iris broke into a smile. Then, she extended her left hand to me. In her palm was her ribbon. I guess I'm actually quite loyal and innocent. The answer to the fourth question is 0. Hearing her answer, I couldn't hold back any longer. I wrapped my arms around Iris. She also put her arms around my back. I'm sorry I couldn't respond back in middle school. I thought a long-distance relationship would be impossible for me. I was overwhelmed with studying, and even then, it was hard to focus while harboring my first crush. Hearing first crush, my heart skipped a beat. Your first crush was me? In my arms, Iris nodded. Kind, hardworking, and we got along so well. You were the only boy who casually said. Then I'll aim for Harvard when I hinted that I wouldn't date anyone less than a Tokyo University graduate. My heart raced. But, as Miss Tokyo University, didn't you have a lot of suitors? Wasn't there anyone good at Tokyo University? I asked, and Iris laughed. Of course, there were many. But I couldn't forget you, who aimed for Harvard for me. What about you? Didn't girls flock to you once they knew you were from Harvard? Those blonde beauties there? I chuckled at her question. There were girls, even if I wasn't noticed by blonde beauties, when I returned home and people knew I was from Harvard. Both men and women treated me differently. But like I said, I hated that, so I usually kept it hidden. I only mentioned it when necessary for work. I took a deep breath. Until I turned 30 and reunited with you, I made sure I didn't develop feelings for anyone else. Iris giggled. So, what if I rejected you? I laughed. Then I'd flaunt my Harvard background and have a blast. Iris laughed heartily at my joke. Then you'll never get to play around. Is that okay? I tightened my arms around her. Of course. You're the only woman I want to be with forever. We hugged in silence for a while. Then, congratulations, someone shouted, causing the surrounding crowd to cheer. Turning around, I saw a large group of people gathered at the gym entrance. It seemed we had been watched. Since when, I wondered. Well, of course, if Miss Tokyo University doesn't come back for a while, everyone would be worried and look outside. It was obvious, but we hadn't noticed and spent the time as if we were alone. I felt embarrassed, my face burning. Suddenly, there was a chant for a kiss. Was it okay to do this? In front of everyone. Under the sacred cherry tree of our middle school. I tried to avoid it, but Iris whispered. If you don't, we won't be able to calm them down. Iris looked down shyly, and I found her irresistibly cute. So, in front of everyone, under the sacred cherry tree of our middle school, I gave Iris a light kiss. Years have passed since then. Iris and I got married. A year later, we were blessed with a child, expanding our family. 3 years later, we had another child, making us a family of 4 now. I've expanded my NPO tutoring program nationwide and also offer it online while continuing in-person sessions. Many children from low-income families seek a place where they belong. I hope to provide that place for them. Iris is busy every day as a bureaucrat. Iris often comes home late at night, so I worry about her health. I try my best to cook a warm dinner for her, filled with love so that she can eat when she gets home. Iris takes care of breakfast. The breakfast she makes is my best source of energy for the day. Sometimes, as I look at our sleeping children, I wonder, what kind of adults will they become? Their father went to Harvard, and their mother went to Tokyo University. I hope they don't feel any undue pressure because of that. After all, their future is wide open. I want them to become whatever they want to be without narrowing their choices. And once they decide what they want to become, I want to support them with all my might as a parent. The same goes for the children who come to our tutoring program. If they find a dream, I want to help them achieve it with all my might. As I thought about these things while watching my children sleep, I heard a faint sound from the entrance. Iris had come home quietly so as not to wake the children. I quietly left the children's room and headed to the kitchen to warm up dinner for Iris. What? No way. It can't be. Just as I was about to marry my fiancée, I stumbled upon a shocking truth. Until then, I had lived as part of a normal family, but on the family register, it stated I was adopted. I wanted to ask what this was about, but at the same time, I was scared to know the truth, so I hesitated for a few days. However, my fiancée, who was suffering from morning sickness during her pregnancy. Whether you ask or not, your parents are still your parents, right? She said. Even after their biological child, who was 15 years younger than me, was born, my parents never neglected me. They raised me with care. Summoning up the courage, I took the family register and asked my parents about it. My name is David. I'm 23 years old. To help my parents in the future, I work for a real estate company. My parents are what you might call landowners, managing various properties. They've inherited land over generations, running apartments, parking lots, and such, making us quite wealthy. However, when my dad was young, they were just landowners living in poverty. Perhaps because of this, or maybe despite it, my dad's motto is simplicity and frugality. We live in a modest single-family home, and though the yard is fairly large, most of it is used for a vegetable garden. Of course, we don't have a housekeeper. Meals are homemade by my mother, and we never had fancy multi-course dinners like on TV. Instead, they spared no expense on my education. They let me try everything I was interested in from a young age and took me on trips during school breaks, both domestically and abroad. For the experience. One memorable trip was to Spain when I was in 3rd grade. My dad chose it because of its many historical buildings. We also visited France, Germany, Canada, Brazil, and many other places. At each destination, my parents would explain the history and culture to me in an easy-to-understand way. I think they studied history and culture just to teach me. Even domestic trips were mostly educational, and we rarely went to famous theme parks or amusement facilities. We only went to fun places on my birthday trips, and I envied classmates who had annual passes and went often. That said, the trips were not unenjoyable. I liked hearing my parents talk about history and culture and tasting various cuisines. However, I remember not liking British food. Even now, I can't eat haggis, a dish made from sheep's organs. Back then, we all wanted to return to Japan quickly, a sentiment we still laugh about. When I became a middle schooler, I got busy with club activities and studies, and we rarely traveled abroad. My parents encouraged me to take the middle school entrance exam to make future exams easier, but I attended public middle school instead. I simply didn't want to part with my elementary school friends, but in middle school, everyone made new friends, and some of us drifted apart. Looking back, I sometimes regret not taking the entrance exam as my parents suggested. Because of this, I took high school entrance exams seriously, balancing study and club activities, leading to very busy days. My parents must have had busy days keeping up with me, too. I didn't attend any cram schools for studying. My parents, both graduates of a prestigious national university, tutored me themselves. During my club matches, my mom participated in parent activities, and my dad always came to cheer me on. Our routine changed slightly just before I entered my third year of middle school. I thought my mom wasn't feeling well lately, but it turned out she was pregnant. I was told I'd have a brother or sister by next Christmas. I always wanted siblings, so I was thrilled. However, this became a reason for teasing at school. My mom was 42 years old. A late pregnancy. I understood from my dad how challenging late pregnancies could be. But it wasn't something I could explain to all my classmates. By the second year of middle school, everyone knew how pregnancy happened. Being teased for having done those things because my mom got pregnant at 42 was embarrassing. Excited about having a sibling, I ended up in a big fight with a classmate who teased me, leading to a call for my parents. My dad came to pick me up from school. He asked me why I fought, but I stubbornly refused to answer. The other boy also refused to explain when his mom asked him. He probably knew his comments were wrong, but I had a different reason. I thought if my parents knew the reason, they would blame themselves. But no matter how much we kept quiet, the truth eventually came out. The homeroom teacher, informed by students who witnessed the incident, explained everything. The teacher apologized to my dad, and the other boy's mom made him bow his head forcefully. In the car on the way home, I asked my dad, who was driving, not to tell my mother. He promised he wouldn't and said, "Thank you for getting angry for your mother's sake." However, he also scolded me all the way home, saying that even if it was for mom, fighting was not acceptable. Afterwards, the homeroom teacher used class time to explain pregnancy and childbirth in detail, and the boy apologized to me. Although I initially didn't intend to forgive him, seeing how genuinely sorry he looked, I accepted his apology. My sister was born on Christmas of my third year in middle school. My mom, who was preparing for Christmas Eve with the family, went into labor. She was worried about the half-prepared meal, but that was not the priority. I accompanied her in the car driven by my dad. My mom's grip, as she endured the pain, was unbelievably strong for someone usually so gentle. We arrived at the hospital around 6 p.m. on December 24th. 12 hours later, my sister was born. I was allowed to see my newborn sister, and tears naturally welled up as I saw her tiny, clenched hand. "You've become a big brother, David," my mother, with her hair all messy and looking exhausted, said to me. Thus, I became a doting older brother to my newborn sister, named Chloe. Whenever I heard Chloe cry, I would rush to her, even if I was studying for exams. If my mom wanted to take Chloe shopping, I insisted she leave Chloe at home, saying there were too many germs outside. My dad, exasperated with me. "You are a high school applicant, so focus on yourself rather than on Chloe," he warned. As the exams drew closer, my parents finally banned me from interacting with Chloe because of my overprotectiveness. I protested that banning me from seeing Chloe stressed me out and made it hard to concentrate, but they didn't budge. When I argued, "What if I fail my exams because of stress?" My dad retorted, "So, you're planning to blame Chloe if you fail?" I had no comeback for that. If I did fail, my parents would surely say it was because I spent too much time doting on Chloe. Thinking this way, I studied desperately for the remaining month before the exam. Though I was in a doting brother phase, I had been studying steadily since the first year of middle school. Having kept my grades at the top, I easily passed my desired high school entrance exam. Easily. Though academically it wasn't a problem, saying it was easy in terms of my personal life is debatable. After finishing the exams and entering spring break, I didn't want to leave Chloe's side for a single day. During that spring break, the classmate who used to tease me also came to see Chloe, and he was completely smitten by her cuteness. I started attending the prestigious high school affiliated with my desired university, so I couldn't spend all my time with Chloe anymore. Naturally, I transitioned from being a doting brother to a regular brother. However, I was still frustrated when people called me a doting brother. What's wrong with a brother being kind to his sister? Before my first summer vacation in high school, I went for a part-time job interview. I wasn't dissatisfied with my allowance, but my dad said it would be good to work for the experience. How much money can you earn from working? How will you spend that money? Knowing this alone will be a good experience, my dad said. So, I went for an interview at a nearby bento shop. I suspected my parents were worried about me being too attached to Chloe. This was my first time writing a resume, and I didn't have much to write. I started from my kindergarten days, and as I recalled my past, I felt a slight sense of unease. I remembered attending kindergarten. But I also vaguely recalled going to a place like a daycare. My parents had always told me I attended kindergarten, and there were photos of me in uniform. However, I had faint memories of being in a different place with many children. Didn't I attend kindergarten? I asked my dad, who was reviewing my resume. He gave me a puzzled look, wondering why I was asking such a question now. Maybe I have memories from a past life. I joked, and he gave me a skeptical look. It seemed the only way to reconcile my faint memories with what my parents told me was to believe in past life memories. My dad said it was likely a mix of dreams and things seen on TV, but I preferred the past life theory. It was more romantic that way. I'm not a geek, but believing in past lives and alternate worlds is more exciting. Though my dad was exasperated, I chose to think that way. I was hired after my interview at the bento shop. At my first part-time job, there were 3 employees and 5 part-timers, including the manager, Sam. There were 3 high schoolers and 2 college students among the part-timers. I developed a crush on one of my fellow part-timers, Emma. Emma started working there when she entered high school to save money for college. At first, I thought she just came from a less privileged family. She always hurried home after the shop closed at 9 p.m., finishing closing tasks in 30 minutes. We didn't have many opportunities to talk except during shared breaks. I later learned from conversations between Sam and Emma that she lived in a foster home. Emma rushed home because the home had a curfew. Her parents had died in an accident when she was in elementary school, and with no relatives to take her in, she ended up in foster care. Being taken in by the facility, Emma must have faced some prejudice. However, Emma was always cheerful, as if nothing had ever been tough. I was drawn to her dedication to working hard every day just to pursue her studies in college. Before the summer vacation of my second year in high school, I confessed my feelings and we started dating. Initially, Emma was reluctant to date because she didn't have parents and lived in a foster home. However, it was Emma and I who were dating, and nothing else mattered. Even if I was concerned about Emma's background, I wanted to date her knowing it, so it shouldn't be an issue. Aren't you viewing yourself the same way those who look at you with prejudice for being raised in a foster home do? Emma was at a loss for words. I wasn't trying to blame her, but I wanted her to have more confidence. Even without parents and being raised in a foster home, Emma was a hardworking and impressive young woman. That's why I fell for her. Emma said if I didn't mind her being busy with work and studies, she would date me. She worked 5 days a week, so I knew she was busy. Even so, I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible. Our dates were mostly study sessions at the library. Coincidentally, we both aimed for the same university. But Emma's mock exam results showed a B grade. Thanks to the educational focus from my parents since I was young, I had an A grade. My parents, who graduated from a prestigious national university, tutored me, so I had an A grade. Emma, without any tutoring and studying alone for the entrance exam, had a B grade. It was clear she was putting in a lot of effort. This clearly showed how strongly Emma wanted to get into university. Her strong desire to get into university made me reflect on my own casual approach to higher education and inspired me to think seriously about my future. Thanks to Emma, I started to take my future seriously. Emma and I worked hard together and applied to the same department at the same university. It was the law department of the most prestigious university in the country. Emma wanted to protect victims of accidents and crimes. I aimed to support my parents' real estate business. Despite different motivations, we both passed. When I confirmed my number on the board, I called my parents. My parents were delighted, and even Chloe, who had just turned 3 and started speaking, congratulated me. Big bro, congrats. Emma also contacted the foster home and received congratulatory messages. She had a delighted smile on her face while holding the phone to her ear. Thus, Emma and I became university students. Emma continued to live at the foster home even after entering university. While many foster homes require residents to leave after high school graduation, the facility where Emma lives allows high school graduates to stay until they turn 20. University students could stay until they graduated. This meant that high school graduates had a 2-year grace period to save for independent living, while university students had to save during their studies. Emma, determined to become independent, continued to work part-time and study diligently. Despite her busy schedule, she never complained. Some of her foster home peers had to work immediately after high school to support their parents, unable to attend university. Compared to them, she felt fortunate to pursue higher education. Emma taught me that one's outlook could transform misfortune into happiness, and I deeply respected her for that. During our university years, there were several times when we faced the threat of breaking up. The main issue was the mismatch in our schedules. Emma's part-time job made it hard for us to find time together. Because of that, we often argued over trivial things, and the topic of breaking up came up many times. However, we managed to stay together and graduated from university. A few months before graduation. After graduation, why don't you live with us? I suggested to Emma that she live with us. Emma had secured a job at a paralegal office. I had also secured a job at a real estate company. However, Emma's goal was to become a lawyer, and she needed to continue studying while working. I thought if she lived with my family, Emma wouldn't need to worry about living expenses. Emma had said she couldn't live in a house with my family, but I had already discussed the situation with my parents and gotten their approval. The rest was up to Emma. She had visited my house several times and knew my parents and Chloe. My parents liked Emma, appreciating her hard work, and Chloe was fond of her too, so there shouldn't be any problems. Even so, I understood her hesitation about living at her boyfriend's family home. So, I decided to tell Emma my resolve. Will you marry me? It was a simple proposal. I had planned to say something more touching or memorable, but in my nervousness, that was all I could manage. Emma accepted my proposal, and it was decided she would live with us after graduating from university. Some might think it premature for a university student to talk about marriage, but I couldn't imagine anyone else as my future wife. Even though I might meet many women in the future, I couldn't imagine wanting to marry anyone more than Emma. For some reason, I felt it was fate. I had been to mixers where I met beautiful and cute women, but none of them made me want to see them again. I couldn't help but compare them to Emma and only saw their flaws. This was also a cause of arguments between Emma and me. Despite her busy schedule, Emma took the initiative in doing household chores when she started living with us after graduation. My parents and I told her to use that time for studying, but she insisted it was no problem since she was used to it from the foster home. However, sometime after we started living together, Emma fell ill. We all thought she had overexerted herself. But in reality, it was something else. Emma was pregnant. Even though we had planned to get married and register our marriage in a few months, Emma was still in the middle of her dream. We had been careful enough, but still. I'm sorry. I apologized, thinking I had hindered her dreams, but Emma frowned. She said, "Aren't you happy?" I wasn't unhappy, but honestly, I felt more apologetic for disrupting her plans. Seeing my confusion, Emma said, "I can take the preliminary exam anytime, it's okay. Even if you graduate from the law department, you can't become a lawyer without going to graduate school. To become a lawyer, no matter how brilliant you are, you either have to go to graduate school or pass the preliminary exam." Emma, who had to leave the foster home upon graduation, had planned to take the preliminary exam instead of going to grad school. Yet she smiled, saying she was happy about starting a family. My parents also said, "Having a child is a miracle," and supported us. Thus, we decided to get married, but I discovered a shocking truth. My registered domicile was at my dad's family home in a neighboring city. To submit the marriage registration, we needed identification documents and a family register. When I saw the family register for the first time, I was shocked. What? No way. It can't be. The family register stated that I was adopted. For a few days, I was torn between wanting to know the truth and fearing it, unable to ask my parents. But as Emma struggled with morning sickness, she said, "Whether you ask or not, your parents are still your parents, right?" Even after their biological child, Chloe, was born, my parents never neglected me. They had always raised me with care. I gathered my courage and, holding the family register, asked my parents, "Can you explain this to me?" I held the family register in my hand and asked my parents to explain the situation. Apparently, my parents, who had the same legal domicile in the same city, didn't know they needed the family register for the marriage process. They were quite surprised that I had the family register. "I'm sorry. We planned to tell you when you turned 20, but we never got around to it." My dad lowered his head apologetically. Then he explained everything. My dad, Michael, and my mother, Sarah, got married when they were 27. Despite not using contraception, they saw no signs of pregnancy even after 2 years. Following the wishes of my late grandparents, they both underwent fertility tests. It turned out that my mother was infertile. Financially well off, my parents pursued fertility treatments, but after 5 years, they still couldn't conceive. When my granddad, who was particular about bloodlines, passed away, they decided to stop the treatments. The treatments had taken a toll on my mother's health and emotional stability. Despite this, she endured it to meet my grandparents' expectations. My dad, unable to watch her suffer, suggested adoption. When my parents visited the foster home where I was, they felt it was fate. I had just turned 4 at the time. I was been placed in an infant home immediately after birth and then moved to a foster home. My name is David, and my dad's name is Michael. They were intrigued by the shared character in our names and spoke to me. Despite being very shy and only opening up to people at the foster home, I smiled at them. Feeling it was destiny that a shy child like me would smile at them, they decided to start the adoption process immediately. My biological dad was unknown, and my biological mother was 16 when she gave birth to me. Since I was only 4, a special adoption could have registered me as their biological child. However, my biological mother had become unreachable, making this impossible. Special adoption requires the consent of both biological parents. My parents tried to locate my biological parents but couldn't. So, I was adopted into their family. To my parents, who longed for a child, I was as good as their biological son. Even after the miraculous birth of Chloe, they couldn't imagine neglecting the son they had raised for over 10 years. I realized that because my parents had difficulty having children, they were able to accept Emma's pregnancy so wholeheartedly. Hearing this, I felt my parents' love more deeply than ever. When Chloe was born, I was 15. It was just before I graduated from middle school. They could have made me independent after middle school since I had completed compulsory education. For the sake of appearances, they could have supported me until high school and then left me on my own. But instead, they continued to love and support me. At that moment, I understood the unease I felt when writing my first resume. What I thought was a daycare was actually the foster home. Though my dad pretended not to know, he must have been anxious inside. I realized they kept it a secret for my sake. It was shortly after Chloe was born, and I was doting on her. If I had known then that I wasn't her biological brother, it would have been a huge shock to me. I might have become bitter, thinking I was unnecessary now that they had a biological child. Understanding my parents' profound love, tears streamed down my face. Thank you. It wasn't something I had thought out. A spontaneous expression of gratitude slipped from my lips. What a time to say that. With tears in his eyes, my dad chuckled, and I laughed along with him. I was certain that my parents would continue to love me as they always had. Our life would go on as usual. A few months later, Emma and I had our wedding. My family, along with several teachers from the facility where Emma grew up, attended the ceremony. Chloe served as the ring bearer, and the ceremony was filled with joy. College classmates and workplace supervisors. With so many people celebrating us, we are truly happy. We aim to make our wedding a joyous and fun occasion. We decided against the traditional emotional letter to our parents. Not everyone at the wedding knew that Emma was raised in a facility. And we saw no need to highlight that. Additionally, it would have seemed odd if I alone expressed gratitude to my parents, so we chose not to include a thank you letter. Instead, I had another plan. A week after the wedding, I suggested to my family that we visit the facility where Emma grew up. In fact, the facility where my parents adopted me was the same one Emma grew up in. Travis, the director who attended our wedding, was delighted that Emma and I, who had both been at the facility, were getting married. So, I had asked Travis for a favor. Emma, unaware of the plan, asked what we were going there for, and I replied, I want to see where I lived when I was little. That was true, but there was another reason. We parked the car and headed to the facility's playground. Huh? Why aren't there any kids playing? Emma looked puzzled. It was unusual for no children to be playing in the yard on a Sunday at this time. Despite her curiosity, I led Emma to the multi-purpose hall overlooking the playground. Congratulations on your wedding, Emma. The children shouted, and party poppers went off. Emma was taken aback. I had planned a small wedding ceremony at the facility. It wasn't as grand as the one at the venue, but with the help of the facility's family, we prepared a handmade wedding ceremony. For the past week, I had been visiting the facility with my parents to prepare. Emma was led inside by the small children holding his hands. Travis said, "Congratulations," and handed him the bouquet. Tears welled up in her eyes. Emma had wanted to invite all the teachers to the wedding, but it was impossible to leave the children alone at the facility. So only a few could attend. I had suggested inviting the children to the wedding, but Emma declined, thinking it would be too much. While understandable, I knew that both the teachers and the children were like family to Emma. It was natural for her to want her family to celebrate with her, and I was sure they wanted to celebrate her as well. So, I asked Travis if we could have a celebration party at the facility. He said that the staff and children would love to help and celebrate. Though it might not have been a full-fledged wedding, we were celebrated by the children and staff. After the performances by the children and staff, I encouraged everyone to head to the dining hall. As a thank you, I had arranged for a catered lunch. The children, seeing the catered food for the first time, ran towards it with shining eyes, only to be scolded by the staff. Looks like they're more excited about the food than my celebration, Emma said, smiling as she watched the children. A high school senior preparing for exams approached Emma and said, "Emma, you've given us hope." Thank you. Emma, who grew up in a foster home, graduated from university and now has a happy marriage. This fact has shown the children, who may have given up on their futures, that they too can dream about their own futures. The child who spoke to Emma had also decided to go to university after seeing Emma's example. With tears in her eyes, Emma said, "Balancing work and studies is tough, so you have to work hard," showing her sisterly side. Watching this, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Emma glared at me, displeased, wondering why I was laughing. "Isn't it hard to be convincing when you're teary-eyed?" I said, making Emma pout and walk towards the children. Chloe was also enjoying the catered food with the other kids. I turned to my parents, who were standing behind me. "So, I was here too." "Yes, it feels nostalgic," my dad said, and my mother smiled nostalgically. After my parents adopted me, Emma came to the facility. Although Emma and I never lived there together, we were now family. It might sound corny, but I felt that our meeting was destiny. Later on, Emma safely gave birth to our child. She worked up until the last possible moment to avoid inconveniencing her job, so I was worried about her health. but she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Chloe was excited to become a big sister. But when I told her, "You're going to be an aunt, not a big sister," she pouted, insisting she wasn't an aunt. Well, I had no intention of making her call herself an aunt. But I wanted her to understand that she wouldn't be a sibling since she was already 9 years old. Chloe became a doting aunt, adoring her newborn niece. "My parents. Looks just like someone we know," they said, giving me a slightly exasperated look. Indeed, I was much the same when Chloe was born. Knowing this, Emma laughed, and I felt a bit embarrassed. "Chloe is just like her big brother," Emma said, almost making me tear up. "Chloe and I aren't related by blood." Yet being told we were similar made me very happy. It felt like Emma was saying that family ties aren't just about blood relations. Emma returned to work shortly after giving birth and passed the preliminary exam that year. It was a test that took about 6 months. Our entire family supported Emma, but balancing childcare and studying must have been extremely challenging. Sometimes she complained about being sleep deprived, but Emma was always smiling. Emma said she tried to smile even more when things were tough. "Making a sad face only makes things harder," she said with a smile, making me admire her even more. Holding our granddaughter, my mother said, "It looks like you'll be under her thumb," laughing. I'm perfectly fine with that. After all, I believe there is no one as hardworking, cheerful, and wonderful as Emma. "I'm home." Chloe rushed into the living room after returning from school, saying, "Lisa, I'm your big sister," to our daughter in my mother's arms. It's amusing to see Chloe's determination to make sure she isn't called an aunt, insisting every day that she's a big sister. When my mother told her to wash her hands first, Chloe hurried off to wash them. "Lisa. That's our daughter's name. Emma, you've given us hope." That was when the name came to me. Chloe is the hope of our family. Lisa is the dream of our family. These two little ones will always remain the dream and hope of our family.